going to jail in Canada. Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Slava P, and today I'm going to talk to you about an issue that I have personal experience with. It's all about Canada's criminal justice system. I want to explain two basic parts of going to jail. It involves provincial prisons and federal facilities. So this is actually a topic that I have personal experience with. I ended up doing 28 months in jail, and I know all about provincial and federal facilities just from my journey cascading down through them. And my goal with this YouTube video is to make something that I would have wanted to watch after I got arrested. So hopefully I can do something like that for you guys. And if you like the content I'm making, be sure to leave a comment, hit that little bell button, subscribe. You know what to do. It's YouTube. You watch more videos than this one. So let's just get started by explaining the difference between provincial prisons and federal jails. Provincial jails and federal prisons. Provincial jail, federal prison. Because the way that people talk about it once you're in jail is what bucket are you from and what mother institution or MI did you end up in. Bucket that you're from is where you started off from. For a lot of people, this is Toronto South, Toronto East, Maplehurst, ones that you may have heard of just by virtue of listening to any of Toronto's rap songs that have come out in the last 5 years. For all intents and purposes, it's pretty much a maximum security facility. You're wearing the orange jumpsuits. It's structured almost exactly like the American jails that we see in TV are, where sometimes you'll be locked down and it's 23-1, which means that you're in your cell 23 hours and you get 1 hour to shower and use the phone or whatever. Provincial jails are no walk in the park. But even though that is true, a lot of guys will prefer to do their time in provincial than end up going to their mother institution or down bottom or federal just because they may have some kind of drama that they do not want to mix themselves up in by going to these large clustered areas like jails. So start from the very beginning. You have to remember that we are dealing with Canada's criminal justice system. The stated goal is to rehabilitate offenders, not to just assess punitive damages on them by forcing them to stay in jail. So some of my viewers who are watching from America might think, oh, this is soft. Yeah, well, maybe it's supposed to be soft, and maybe your system is just unduly harsh. And everybody's journey starts at provincial, okay? Provincial is where you go if you haven't made bail, if you're awaiting bail, if you're caught drunk driving, you're getting brought to provincial. If you also receive a sentence that's less than 2 years, you are going to be doing all of your time in a provincial. If you receive a sentence more than 2 years, you go to federal. Now, if you go to federal, there's 3 security levels: minimum, medium, and maximum. Personally, I've only ever done minimum time, except for the 7 months that I was in assessment. Assessment is technically a medium, but you can't say you did medium time if you just did time in an assessment. It's not kosher. I spent like 3 weeks in Toronto South, and let me tell you that 3 weeks was the hardest time in my life. Toronto South is no walk in the park. None of the buckets really are. None of the provincial jails are a walk in the park. But that being said, a lot of guys will prefer to do their time there because of dead time. Time counts for 1.5 to 2 days for every day that you spent awaiting trial. Let's say you get arrested for something, you don't make bail, and the amount of time that you waited for your case to run out is actually worth more than the time that you would have spent fighting it on the outside. So it is really just a numbers game to a lot of guys where they're kind of doing this Price is Right math where they're figuring out what makes more sense. Stay in and maybe double it, or get out and try to fight it, or just plead out to something and do your fed time, which, like I said, because all provincial time is max time, federal time is a lot more easygoing. It's not easy by any stretch, but it's a lot more easygoing because provincial has so many people running in and out of it every day. A lot more stuff comes in. To get something into a federal facility is very difficult. To get contraband into a provincial is almost some people's full-time job. You see a story every once in a while about some kind of rapper eating lobster on a cell phone in provincial jail. Yeah, it's because it's provincial jail. I'm going to start with my time in Toronto South. Like I said, this was stressful, but it's nothing insurmountable. Pretty much you get there and you're put into like this little horseshoe-shaped intake, right? And they put you in a holding cell until they can process you. When they process you, you go up to a desk, you give them your information, you go to another little series of cells, you strip down naked in front of another man, you spread your butt cheeks open, and you let them look inside you. Then you take off all your clothes, you put them in a bag, and you get your orange jumpsuit. And at this point, you realize, yeah, I'm in jail. The second time you realize you're in jail is when you get the food. Right? It'll be like airline food, 3 trays. You get like a carb, a protein, and then some kind of fruit or vegetable. So after you're given your kit of orange, pretty much you are sent to the intake range. The intake range is where everybody has to go until they figure out what to do with you. You're normally on that range for 1 or 2 weeks, and hopefully you are able to make bail in that time. If you're able to make bail, you get to leave intake and go to the courtroom, get the good news, and go home. If you don't make bail, or if you've already been sentenced, you still need to go through intake, but after intake, you go on a specific range. All the ranges are more or less the same structurally. Some of the ranges enjoy more freedoms, and it depends on the behavior of the inmates inside the ranges. I went to intake and then I landed on a range. Because I personally have no affiliations, I was able to go to a range that was mostly guys from Weston and Flemington Park. And that range was actually very well kept. There was an older gentleman who had been there for a while who kind of kept the peace. And because the range kept the peace, it was allowed to be out until 10 o'clock. The TVs were on. They had these like plastic kind of couches that people set up on. And that just all came by virtue of it being well run and respectable and everybody kind of knowing what time it was, right? If you're worried about violence against you or anything like that, as long as you keep to yourself, you should be fine. The only time I really saw violence was when someone landed on the wrong range. The prisons all have a team of people who are just solely dedicated to keeping in mind which hood has beef with which other hood in Toronto. All the fights that you see in jail, that I saw in jail personally, none of them were really one-on-one. So this idea that you have where you're going to go to jail and you're going to have to like learn how to box or do Muay Thai, forget it. If someone wants to beat you up, them and 13 of their friends will beat you up. There's no avoiding that. In terms of like the actual vibe of Toronto South, think of it kind of like a high school without any art on the walls. Some people will argue that the food is better in one bucket to another. Listen, let me tell you that it's all kind of garbage at the end of the day. So speaking of high school, provincial jails are an incredibly young batch of guys. Okay, I was 29 when I went in, and I was damn near the oldest person there by a long shot. You pretty much have a bunch of 18 to 19-year-old criminals running around all day with maybe one father figure there that controls the peace. If you have fantasies about going to jail and reading a book all day, no, those are done. So you can move within the jail with an escort, but you have to go through like 4 metal detectors every time. You have to sit on this machine that like looks inside of you to see if you have anything in there. If there's something wrong with you, you can go to the doctor, but getting that appointment is impossible. And getting like a steady medication is also very, very difficult because the light stays on all the time. Anyway, I asked the doctor for some melatonin and he gave me like 4 for the 3 weeks that I was there. But again, you have to do the math and you have to think about, does it make more sense for me to sit here and collect dead time than to go down bottom? Do I want to go to federal or do I want to stay? Kingston, Ontario was about 4 hours away from Toronto. They put about 4 offenders per van, 2 vans, and your wrists are handcuffed, your ankles are handcuffed. Dehumanizing experience ever. You're led into the back of a van, piled in there, and your ankles are getting shaved, and you better be good friends with the person beside you because that's the only person you have to talk to for a little bit. God forbid you go in the winter because I promise you they are not turning on the heat for you. When you get to Kingston, you're arriving at JAU, Joyceville Assessment Unit. This is a mandatory stop for anybody, regardless of what kind of security they have or regardless of how much time they got, as long as it's over 2 years. JAU used to be a medium facility back in the day. It's in the middle of nowhere, okay? The closest thing is like a John Deere store in the middle of Kingston. And Joyceville is shaped like a big box, a big boxy donut with the center cut out. Okay, so on 2 wings, at the top 2 wings, you have the ranges. The ranges go 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D. In the middle is just a way for people to get out while in the jail. That is not the yard. But that's how people get from their wings to the other 2 wings. And the other 2 wings is where you have the library, the kitchen, the intake, the release, all of that stuff is on the other side. So one side you live on, one side you play on. And the yard has a pretty sizable track with a pretty nice view of the Rideau Canal. But it's also got, 3 barbed wire fences between you and that sunset. So there's enough fights that happen in the yard. When you get to JAU, you go through intake again, but this time you land right on a range. This is like one of the most important times in your journey because the range that you land on is really going to dictate how you do your own time. So you get to assessment and you take off all the orange clothes that you had on from Provincial. All your bucket clothes go in the trash. They give you a new set of clothing. Now, this set of clothing is like jeans, blue t-shirts, blue rugby shirts, tidy whities, wool socks, spring jacket, which kind of looks like a bomber jacket. It actually does look pretty nice, but the point is that it's no longer that like orange and American feeling system of punishment. Now it really feels like you're in Canada. Everybody goes to JAU regardless of the charges. This means that there's two ranges that are dedicated to protective custody cases. Who checks into protective custody? Birds. Pretty much sex offenders, anybody who got goofed up on the range for saying something bad, and anybody who owes money and just decides to check in. Pretty much if you check in, your reputation as a criminal is soiled forever. Okay, checking in is the worst thing that you can do in jail, and it's a very hard stain to rub off. Also, if you check in, you can't go to work and you can't like interact with any of the other population. So I imagine it's actually pretty boring too. If you did not do anything that starts with the letter R, you really have no worries. But if you check in, you're going to be, 2C and 2D are the check-in ranges. The hierarchy of jail is pretty much everybody's kind of the same except sex offenders, rats, and cops. Those people are at the bottom of the ladder and they're also incredibly protected, so chances are you're not even going to see them. Not everybody that you're going to meet at JAU is a hardened criminal. A lot of guys there are there for fraud. There's a surprising amount of guys there for drinking and driving. Some varying shade of civilian. So if that describes you, then you shouldn't have a hard time finding your tribe. So JAU has a capacity of about 580 people. It's a lot smaller than Provincial Jail, but it's a lot older as well. So the first thing that you think of when you enter your range and they lock that door behind you is how dirty it looks. And it's not that people don't take care of the ranges. Some of them don't, but they're just this shade of green and beige that makes you feel like you're walking through like a BioShock level where everything is just grungy. Once you're on the range, that shit is all in your kitchen. On the other side of your kitchen is the place where you can do your laundry, take your shower. That's kind of like the laundry room / the octagon because there's no cameras there. That's where guys will choose to fight. And then every single door down the range ends up being a cell. As I understand it, they are converting all of JAU to be double bunks. This sucks because the cells are incredibly small. They're smaller than the ones you're going to have in Provincial, and they're also older, so they just feels more like it's on top of you. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Those cells are not fun, especially if you and your cellmate don't get along. You walk in, there's your double bunks, there's a metal table, no chair, and you have two cabinets, a top and a bottom one. If you keep going to the back, there's like the radiator thing right underneath your window. And most often than not, you will just figure out a way to split things with your cellie. Now, if your cellie wants to big dog you, that's on you. If your cellie is like a big substance abuse issues, that could also be very annoying for you because those people tend to keep erratic schedules and have erratic behaviors. So your time at JAU will probably be 90 days. If you're not lucky, you'll have to wait a little bit. The point is for your parole officer to see you, find out who you are, and figure out what classification of security you meet. So for most people who are watching this YouTube video anticipating to go to jail, you're probably a minimum to a medium risk. That divide, minimum to medium, makes a lot of difference. And it's also important to know that a lot of this stuff changed from COVID. I went to JAU before COVID, and then COVID happened 3 months into my stay. So everything that was happening, which was they were letting A, B, C, and D all out for yard at the same time, I understand that's no longer happening. I also know that you can get your belongings sent into you and your TV. Now I understand that you can only get your TV, and I actually heard a rumor that they're not even letting you send your own TV, but you have to buy it from the home hardware in Odessa in Kingston. So once you're at JAU, your day is going to be pretty much regimented. The doors unlock at 8 o'clock. If you have a job, you're set to work it. I was working in the kitchen, And I think that's one of the best jobs you can have. You can also work for SIS, which is pretty much just doing institutional laundry and kind of repairs and stuff like that. You can work in the machine shop. But the point is that you're spending 90 days at JAU if you're lucky. Okay, so for that 90 days, get a job, get your clothing sent in, get a TV. The nice thing is that they actually have an amazing cable package in jail. They have HBO, they have Crave, which is like Canadian Hulu, they have all the sports channels. Watch a lot of TV. You're going to be watching a lot of TV. You're going to be reading a lot of books, unless you want to be interacting with people. After 90 days at JAU, after you've seen your parole officer, you should be getting a piece of paper that says, this is the mother institution you are going to be going to. You will have already found out what security level you're at, either minimum, medium, or maximum, but now you get to find out exactly where you go. If you're going to minimum, there's 3 choices. There's Beaver Creek, there's Pittsburgh, and there's Collins Bay minimum. Like I said, I only went to a minimum security prison, and I'm going to be explaining all about that in another video, but I just wanted to highlight the difference between provincial jails and federal prisons using my own experience. You know what? If you do end up going to jail, it's not all bad news. There's a lot of job training, addiction treatment, peer counseling, and support that is accessible for you to take advantage of and turn your life around if that's what you want to do. So as long as you make the most of it, it should not be the worst experience of your life. Anyway, this has been Slava P talking to you about going to jail in Canada and the difference between provincial jails and federal prisons. Like, subscribe, there's going to be more stuff coming, and thanks for watching.